Hi, my name is Vanessa Spiller from Jumpstart Psychology. I'm a clinical psychologist and, more importantly, the parent to a young adult with fetal alcohol spectrum disorder or FASD. One of the concerns that professionals often have about diagnosing FASD is a fear that the diagnosis will stigmatise the child and the parent. They voice concern that diagnosis will be a heavy burden, particularly for birth mothers, who will experience excessive guilt and shame should a diagnosis be confirmed. They also worry the diagnosis won't bring about any discernible benefits to the child. One of the best things about the training, education, and work that I do is that I get to meet and talk with many birth parents of young people and adults with FASD. I also get to talk and interact with many carers of young people with FASD, particularly online. One thing that most of them talk about is shame, guilt, and stigma, but not in the ways that most professionals might imagine. Long before getting an official diagnosis of FASD, many parents and carers and their respective schools and communities recognised that their children were experiencing significant and often extreme emotional, psychological, and behavioural difficulties and challenges. Their children had often received multiple different diagnoses, including ADHD, specific learning disorders, oppositional defiant disorder, conduct disorder, autism spectrum disorders, reactive attachment disorder, just to name a few. Parents and carers often describe feeling embarrassed, hopeless, and unheard as they consulted multiple professionals and were referred to specialist programs and parenting courses that didn't have answers for the difficulties that they and their children were facing. They felt incompetent, frustrated, and judged when these suggestions and interventions didn't work for their children, and when they tried to explain this to these supports and helping professionals, they were told that they weren't being firm enough, consistent enough, that they weren't using the right approaches, that they were being too soft, too harsh, or needed to bond more with their children. Parents and carers describe experiencing profound shame and embarrassment as their children are suspended and expelled from childcare, kindergarten, preschool, and school. And after they were repeatedly called to meetings with teachers, behavioural support staff, and principals, and repeatedly told that their children's behaviour must change. As they grow older, parents describe feeling judged by family members and other parents who often tell them that all their children need is strong discipline. They feel isolated and abandoned as their children are asked to leave sporting teams, church groups, and are often identified as bad influences, willful, defiant, and out of control. Birth parents and parents describe feeling ashamed, embarrassed, and like a failure as their children drop out or are expelled from school, get involved with drinking and drugs, repeatedly get in trouble for lying and stealing, and end up involved in the juvenile and later the adult criminal justice systems. Parents describe their adolescent and adult children as running away, getting involved with inappropriate peers, being exploited financially and sexually, and engaging in sexually inappropriate behaviours themselves. Their adult children find it difficult to hold down jobs, have ongoing issues with substances, and are often involved in the criminal justice system, making the same mistakes over and over again. They are unable to manage their finances and frequently return to live at home in crisis when they are unable to manage living independently. Research on the stress levels of parents and carers of children with FASD showed cortisol levels similar to those seen in combat soldiers and the parents of children living with cancer. Birth parents and carers, it seems, are very well versed in shame, stigma, and embarrassment, even without a diagnosis of FASD. How can diagnosis help? Research tells us that early diagnosis is associated with better long-term outcomes and aids in the prevention of the secondary conditions. These conditions are common in people with FASD and are not directly attributable to the condition itself and include things like depression, incarceration, and substance abuse. Similar to other mental health and chronic physical health conditions, FASD does simply not go away if it is not diagnosed. Common sense would tell us that just like their physical and mental health counterparts, failing to correctly diagnose often results in a failure to adequately treat. And failure to treat and find appropriate supports contributes to an exacerbation of issues and even more adverse outcomes. With an average life expectancy at birth of 34 years and the leading causes of death being external causes such as accidents and suicide, not physical health issues associated with FASD, early diagnosis would appear to be key in starting to address some of these discrepancies. Birth parents also tell us that diagnosis gives them a missing piece to the puzzle. It provides them with an explanation for the many confusing and complex behaviours that have been present all of their children's lives. It allows them to view their children as having a diffuse brain injury that requires support and treatment rather than severe behavioural issues that require self-control and harsher consequences. It allows them to change their expectations of their children, modify their child's environment, and employ brain-based strategies that enable them and their children to slowly learn and experience some success. It enables them to view their children with increased empathy and understanding, and to be able to view their complex and challenging behaviours as symptoms of this brain injury rather than bad character, criminality, or willful defiance. Like many of the early pioneers in autism, many birth parents of people with FASD find diagnosis encourages them to become powerful advocates for their children, fighting to change systems, including the education and criminal justice systems, and to find supports such as the NDIS that will assist their children, including adult children, to be successful. Some of Australia's leading advocates for FASD are birth parents, people like Anne Russell from the Russell Family Fetal Alcohol Disorders Association, or Sam Pennell from the Queensland FASD Support Group. So hopefully this video has been helpful in exploring the value of early diagnosis of FASD, as well as better understanding how guilt and stigma impacts on birth parents and carers, regardless of diagnosis. Please feel free to share this video, and if you're interested in more educational training on the topic, particularly if you're a parent or carer, please go to my website, www.jumpstartpsychology.com, and consider signing up for the Explained by Brain group program being held in Brisbane. I'm still taking registrations for this group. Otherwise, try connecting in with one of the many great online groups and resources available. You can also contact me via email at jumpstartpsychology@gmail.com. Thanks for listening.